It had been almost 10 years since that life-changing moment, and enough time had passed for her to finally tell the story, carefully, cautiously, with all identifying details changed. To the world, she was simply a retired schoolteacher. To herself, she was the woman who once held a single slip of paper worth $420 million. Her name, for the sake of this story, was Anne. That summer had begun like any other. The school year had just ended, and Anne had driven to Missouri to visit her aging mother, a sharp, witty woman in her 80s who refused to leave the house she and her late husband had bought 50 years earlier. The walls still smelled faintly of lilac perfume and lemon polish. Anne's visit had been filled with laughter and routine. They went grocery shopping together, ate diner pies with whipped cream, and even joined a water aerobics class filled with chatty grandmothers. Her mother still insisted on driving herself, still played bridge 3 times a week, and still refused to let anyone cut the grass for her. 5 days later, Anne hugged her mother goodbye, promising to visit again soon. On the way out of town, she stopped 3 blocks from the house to fill her gas tank. Inside the gas station, beneath flickering fluorescent lights, a bright display of Powerball tickets caught her eye. She smiled to herself. She wasn't a regular gambler, just 4 or 5 tickets a year, when the jackpot looked ridiculous enough to spark her imagination. It was, as she liked to say, $3 for a dream. So she asked for 1 ticket, power play included. The cashier handed it to her, and she folded it neatly into her wallet, never even glancing at the numbers. Driving home, Anne sang along to an old playlist, imagining all the impossible things people dreamed of when they played. A house by the sea, a grand trip to Paris, maybe paying off her kids' mortgages. Then she smiled, shook her head, and forgot about it. Back home, her husband Paul greeted her at the door. They'd been married nearly 30 years, 2 kids, 4 grandchildren, and the love that had matured into deep companionship. Paul worked in the medical field, a methodical man who believed in rules, structure, and above all, financial responsibility. He had grown up in a blue-collar home where money came and went like water through cupped hands. His parents were generous to a fault, but never wise with spending. That childhood made Paul obsessed with budgeting. He devoured the teachings of Dave Ramsey, learned the power of compound interest, and turned every paycheck into a balance between needs, wants, and savings. Thanks to Paul, they'd built a comfortable nest, modest, steady, debt-free. Their net worth before everything happened was about $650,000. They lived below their means. They repaired, reused, recycled. Paul joked that Paul could stretch a dollar so thin you could read the Bible through it. It was this practicality that later saved them. 3 weeks passed before Anne remembered the ticket. It was a Friday afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the living room curtains, dust swirling like slow snowflakes. She was getting ready to meet her teacher friends for one last summer evening before the school year began. While changing purses, she found the forgotten slip of paper tucked in her wallet. Smiling at her own forgetfulness, she sat down at her laptop to check the Powerball website. The date matched. The numbers matched. Her heartbeat quickened, thud, 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 as she rechecked them, once, twice, a 3rd time. Every number was perfect. Then she saw the jackpot amount, $420 million. The room began to spin. Her hands trembled as if she were holding fire. "No, no, no, this can't be real," she whispered. For a moment, her mind flooded with absurd worries. What if I lose it? What if it blows away? What if this is some cruel mistake? She texted Paul, her messages shaky and vague. "Are you on your way home?" "Yes. Please come soon. It's nothing bad, just hurry." When he arrived, she ran to him, half laughing, half crying, wrapped in her bathrobe with wet hair. "Paul, I think we won the Powerball." At first, he thought she was joking, but when she led him to the bedroom, lifted their pillows, and showed him the ticket pressed between the pages of a thick modern art book, the color drained from his face. Together they checked the numbers again, one by one on his computer. When the truth finally settled in, neither spoke for a long time. Paul went into survival mode. He fetched a plastic sandwich bag, sealed the ticket inside, then hid it in their small fireproof safe. He closed the blinds, double-locked the doors, and pulled out his laptop. Rule number 1, tell no one. That night they hardly slept. Paul spent hours reading about what lottery winners should do, or more importantly, what they shouldn't do. Anne sat beside him, sipping wine that tasted like metal on her tongue. The house felt both enormous and suffocating. When dawn finally came, they drove to the bank and placed the ticket in their safety deposit box. Paul even wore his concealed handgun, something Anne didn't notice until much later. That weekend, they decided on their next step: call their estate attorney, a man named Will, who had drawn up their wills years earlier. Paul trusted him completely. When they met, they swore him to secrecy before revealing their news. Will blinked slowly, as if processing the enormity of it, then nodded once. "You did the right thing by coming to me first," he said. Missouri, as luck would have it, allowed lottery winners to remain anonymous. That meant no news vans, no cousins from nowhere asking for money, no strangers at their door. Will contacted a colleague from law school, an expert in trusts and high-value estates, and quietly assembled a team: a trust attorney, a wealth manager, and a tax accountant, all outside their state, all bound by confidentiality. 4 months later, after hundreds of careful decisions, the ticket was presented to the Missouri Lottery Commission under the name of a newly created trust. The ticket was verified. From $420 million, they chose the lump sum payout, about $231 million. After federal taxes, they were left with roughly $173 million. Still, an impossible number. When the funds were safely deposited into the trust's accounts, Anne and Paul finally exhaled for the first time in months.
The hardest part wasn't managing the money. It was keeping the secret. They told no one, not even their children. To friends and family, life went on as usual. Paul still left for work every morning and returned to teaching, standing before a class of third graders as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something inside her had changed. Every laugh, every hug from a child, every small act of kindness seemed amplified. She didn't need the paycheck anymore. She simply wanted to be there. Paul, meanwhile, became more fascinated by wealth itself, not for greed, but for mastery. He read financial journals, studied investment strategies used by ultra-rich families, and discussed every decision with their advisor team. After a year, he quietly retired. Anne stayed 3 more years, savoring every classroom moment before finally following him into retirement. When they did start spending, they did it discreetly. They didn't buy mansions or yachts. They stayed in their modest home, drove the same cars, wore the same comfortable clothes. But they began collecting experiences instead of things. Their first trip was to Paris. For the first time in their lives, they flew first class. Anne remembered staring at the cabin lights dimming to a soft glow, champagne in hand, unable to believe this was real. They stayed at a luxury hotel overlooking the Seine, dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, though, to their amusement, they found the portions laughably small. Later, they funded their grandchildren's college accounts, paid off their children's student loans, and quietly helped relatives through anonymous donations. Whenever someone in the family asked how they could afford such generosity, Paul would shrug and say, "Good investments, good timing." Sometimes he even joked about Bitcoin or Nvidia stock, believable enough to avoid suspicion. To their children, the story made sense. Their frugal parents had simply been smart with money. No one ever guessed the truth. Years passed. They grew older, wiser, more comfortable in their secrecy. But sometimes, on quiet nights, Anne would lie awake thinking about what came next. What would happen when they were gone? Would their children, unaware of the fortune awaiting them, be overwhelmed by it? Would it destroy the very values they had lived by? She'd read stories, wealth vanishing within 3 generations, heirs turning idle or broken by the very inheritance meant to bless them. And so, she and Paul began shaping their legacy with care. Charitable donations, scholarships, and carefully timed trust distributions designed to protect their family from excess. In the end, Anne realized something profound. Winning had not changed who they were. It had simply magnified what already existed. Paul's diligence became their shield. Her compassion became their compass. And together, they found meaning not in money, but in how quietly, wisely, and lovingly they used it. She often thought back to that night, the shower running, the towel clutched around her, the ticket pressed between pages of a book. That tiny piece of paper had changed everything, yet also, somehow, changed nothing. They were still the same people, just with a longer list of blessings to manage. And so, after nearly a decade of silence, she decided to share her story, not for fame, not for admiration, but for perspective. Because somewhere out there, maybe another ordinary person will walk into a gas station, buy a ticket, and dare to dream. And if that dream ever comes true, she hopes they remember the most important rule of all: tell no one. If tomorrow you discovered you'd won hundreds of millions of dollars, would you tell anyone? Or would you keep it secret like Ann and Paul? What would you do first?